Okay, good. Good.
Hello. Hi.
Hi, we haven't actually met in person, but hi, I'm Karen.
Hi, Karen. I'm Katie.
Sorry I missed the last meeting.
Okay.
Jim and I both missed about virtual appointments in a row. I was off a day or something.
That's all right. Thank you for being here this week.
Okay, I guess we can call to order, Katie, is that what we want to do? At 4:31, would you call a roll, please?
Yep. Mr. Vandenberg,
Here.
Mr. Buck,
Here.
Ms. Burkett,
Here.
sorry, give me 1 second. Mr. Kenter, Mr. Fink.
Here. Okay, I can indicate that the Freedom of Information Act requirements were met in terms of prior notice of the meeting and the publishing of agenda. And we can now move, Katie, to personal appearances.
We have none.
And unfinished business.
This is considered new business, so we have,
Can I chime in, Katie?
yes, sir.
If we're ready to get to it. So first there's been a motion to reconsider. And that motion to reconsider before we go do anything else has to be voted on and approved by a majority.
Yeah, we do see that, Joe, in the statement under new business. I was just trying to get us
I'm sorry.
into
okay.
that point of the meeting where in fact we're now ready to entertain that, I guess, Katie, would be the appropriate thing. Thank you, Joe, for clarification.
I'm sorry, I should have pulled that. I got a lot of things pulled up here.
What? You do? What are you talking about? No, so under the new business part of the agenda is a motion for consideration on the approval of the preliminary review that was granted on 1/25/21 for the renovation of the Folly River Inn, 87 Center Street. Presenter was Ryan Buck. So do we have a motion for reconsideration?
Move for reconsideration.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we can open for discussion, is that correct, Katie?
Yes, sir.
I would like to open the discussion with a comment that we have had clarification on whether or not, and this is all born out of my ignorance, some of it, but also my,
Hold on a second.
yes, sir, yeah, Joe,
I'm gonna, the motion to reconsider is just to get the issue on the table.
okay,
I believe
If it passes, then we can get in, it's like the prior vote never took place. And we can start discussing.
and Joe,
But, so, I mean,
Joe, I believe Mr. Fink is discussing the.
there's gonna be a second vote, a substantive vote,
Right,
if
Joe,
y'all understand what I'm saying.
Joe, yes, and Mr. Fink is discussing his reasons for the motion to reconsider, to get a vote
Okay.
on the motion to
All right, I'm
reconsider.
sorry then, all right, I'm just, okay,
no, thank you, Joe.
that's what we should address.
Okay, well, that's what I was trying to explain was that in reconsidering the topic of the motion, I had subsequently recently taken, just prior to the last meeting, the required annual training, which include ethics training, and the literal interpretation, and what they alluded to in the training things we took from MASC was a question as to whether or not an integral participant in the renovation project, in this case, Ryan Buck's company, did that preclude him from being the presenter or not? And I had asked for clarification on that, which you provided, Joe, and he is, in fact, because of the size of our municipality and things of that nature, he clearly is not in any violation in terms of being able to represent the project. That was the one issue. The other issue was relative to the literal or the subjective interpretation of the ordinance that applies to what the specific things are that should be considered relative to new renovations, employ practical elements, native and coastal communities, et cetera, et cetera. There's a list of them here, and I wasn't positive that I was comfortable that I understood where the renovations were compliant with that, or whether they were consistent with what were we using them to measure against in terms of Center Street business. And that's why I was hoping that we could get some clarification from Ryan on some of the misgivings. There was not, that I realized I had, there was not, until I got a kind of an explanation of the diagrams, a little better understanding, and I physically took pictures of the building, I had misinterpreted, Ryan, what the parapet was in terms of covering the front of the building being right above what is the existing garage doors. And so I had to then question to myself whether or not the individual items that this list that we're supposed to take into consideration, if this remodeling is consistent with those things that we're supposed to take into consideration before we approve what is the significant change to the outside of the building's appearance. So that's where I was coming from with a request to clarify in my own little pea brain here. I also mentioned to Katie, because it was her first time with being involved in this processes, that in many times, a lot of the ordinances that the Design Review Board entertains are subjective in nature, clearly. I mean, we can't say that doesn't exactly match, this does. There's always been subjective interpretations, especially when there was issues, which Ryan was good enough to educate me on some months ago, that when renovation costs exceed 50% of the value of the building, the whole building gets lost. And we did have some buildings here that we felt it was worth looking in greater detail into to preserve the buildings, because we felt as a board that they were part of the character of Folly Beach. So my concern became, have we discussed with an appropriate level of detail the individual things here that talk about whether the proposal that Ryan brought before the board, which I think we didn't have copies of these last meeting, not my fault, not Katie's fault. I was looking on my phone, which, not being an architect, I wasn't able to follow too well. And it was in reconsideration after that. I thought, well, did we actually did we arrest or change the spectacular effects of the outside appearance? Is it incongruence? Is it incongruent with the details surrounding the rest of the immediate area? There's a list of these things that are listed, and I just am questioning whether or not we have followed the guidance that's in the ordinance. Are we held by are these guidelines, or are these stipulations to us?
Well, and the ordinance for the DRB, well, I mean, they are, let's see.
Can I ask a question here real quick before you answer? I thought this was basically, I always understood that a reconsideration, he was just making some changes based on comments from the last meeting.
It was a reconsideration of our approval of the preliminary review, which is a go-ahead with several things related to the renovation project, that after that meeting, which approved the preliminary review with only 3 members voting that were present, I surfaced, in my opinion, a question as to whether or not I was fully understanding of what the impact was, consistent with what the DRB's guidance was. Did that help at all, Karen, or did I confuse things?
So, are we looking at the new one or the whole thing again?
So we are doing basically if this motion for reconsideration passes, which we have not taken a vote on that yet, if that passes, we are basically having a do-over in January. We had board members that thought about that within 24 hours, reached out to me as the staff liaison and said, I don't think we fully understood the scope and what we were approving. I would like to reconsider. So we're at this special meeting. We're going to see if the board agrees to reconsider that. And then we will have a discussion on the preliminary review. Our applicant has provided some additional information and renderings. And then based off this, the board can either ask for additional information, additional redesign of the scope of work, lessening, whatever the board chooses, and then go from there. We're not necessarily granting preliminary approval at this meeting.
All right, if we don't vote for reconsideration, what happens?
Then it stands as what happened on the January meeting, and there are no revisions to the preliminary approval.
Oh, boy, this is really confusing.
No,
Thank you.
Yep.
so, did you have a question for me?
So Skip, your original question was, Joe, are you looking at 3305?
I am.
Okay, so within our code of ordinances, there is a section for the design review board in chapter 33 that outlines what is needed for accelerated, preliminary, conceptual, final review, etc. And I think your question, Skip, was, are these subjective? How literal are they? And what links can the board take for interpretation? Is that correct, Skip?
Yes.
Okay.
So you're looking at subsection D,
D as in,
documentation required for review.
yes, and potentially B as in
Right.
boy for the duties.
Those are two different things.
Yes. And so I don't know what
Let's
Skip,
see.
right, and so
let's
that
see.
is for Skip to clarify.
Well, and Joe, part of my concern is I don't want to leave either the board or the city in a position to where if we've approved something that's inconsistent with what the rules are supposed to be, does that come back later by another tenant on Senate Street, or can it anyway come back to bite Mr. Buck in his business for the renovation he's doing? I'm just trying to make sure that I understand that we're compliant with what it is. It's in the scope of our duties, and is this project consistent with those particular requirements?
Well, I mean, people do point to what you have done in the past. I would not be surprised at all. But let me see if I can answer the question more specifically. Under chapter 33.050, subsection B2, it says y'all have to review all new construction, renovation, other changes to ensure that all of these things are done. So you've got to review it to make sure there's compliance with all of these things under subsection 2. But all of these things are very subjective,
Right.
right? So I want to make that clear. I mean, you're required to consider these things, but they're all pretty subjective. Now, if you're talking about the documentation required for preliminary review, I mean, that seems to be pretty clear that they have, and that's subsection D4.
Yep.
You know, that's pretty clear. It sets out the 4 things someone has to bring to you guys. But that's documentation.
Right.
So, you know, I don't know that there's a good hard answer. I mean, the statute says what it says, the ordinance, and it just says that you guys have to ensure that each of these items, each of these boxes are considered. They have to employ practical elements native to southern coastal communities. The design has to address the entire exterior envelope. But, and so on, but again, I mean, these are very subjective things. So I don't know, I get too worried about, I mean, you know, obviously people can always come back and say, well, you let these guys do this. But I'm not sure that's something I would get too wrapped up with, to be honest with you.
Okay,
I mean, everyone has to operate under the same ordinance unless we change it. And the same considerations, but those considerations are subjective. So y'all have discretion here to decide what to do. And I'm sorry that isn't a real definitive answer. They are required to bring documentation, but I haven't heard any problems with that. Of course, I wasn't at the first meeting.
okay, so we shouldn't pursue with any more discussion until we take a vote on the motion to,
If everyone is comfortable with voting for a motion for reconsideration, we can do that now.
Yeah, and again, let me be clear. Let me see if I can help. If you vote to reconsider, it's like last week never happened, and you're back at square one.
I don't think that, am I allowed to say something here?
Sure, well, yeah,
I get mixed up on those rules, but I think that, I'd hate to see all of that work go out the window, because, I mean, I thought, the plans, everything are well presented. To me, the issue is, does the facade, the recent changes that he was showing us, I think it's the only thing we really need to address at this point. I mean, the site plan, everything were very detailed. They were all online, I looked at them, I mean, they were great. I think that, I thought what we need to consider today is the modifications he's made to the exterior, based on.
that is not
That's not what we're.
really what's on front now. If you do vote to reconsider, yeah, then that's gonna be part of the discussion. But I don't know any other way to explain it. I mean, if you vote against reconsidering, you may be outvoted, and you just go back to the same, you know, you get to the substance of it then. You just start from the beginning. And I know I mean, this happens. This is the second time it's happened in the last year. It's not something that should really be a huge concern. I mean, it's indicative of people giving some thought to that matter. All right?
but until we vote to reconsider, we can't even ask for clarification from Mr. Buck or anything else. There's
Right.
nothing that he can do to,
We're not talking about design elements or the application currently.
Correct. I think you should stick, I mean, the substantive discussion comes after a motion to reconsider. And only if it passes.
Right.
So any other discussion about that? All right,
Okay, I'm gonna take roll for the vote, for the motion to reconsider the preliminary approval of 87 Center Street.
And I assume I'm not in on that?
And
or-
Ryan is recusing.
Right,
He has sent
that's
me an email
Yeah.
that he is not voting at this meeting.
Right.
Mr. Vanderwerf?
Yes.
Ms. Burkett?
Yes.
Mr. Fink?
yes.
The motion passes.
Okay, so now, can we go ahead and move with discussion about what he's done so that we don't have to schedule a whole nother meeting to actually, what we'll be able to
So that
solve
is our-
tonight?
That is our next business, item, is the preliminary approval of 87 Center Street. So you guys can now have that discussion, and either make a motion for granting preliminary approval, or you can just have a discussion. We don't need a motion on the floor to do discussion.
Okay, well, I would like to have discussion to open with, if that's acceptable. Then Karen, this is your perfect opportunity, not having had the benefit of Ryan's earlier explanations. No, you didn't have the benefit of Ryan's earlier explanations, which was a good, it certainly was a good explanation for 90% of what I think was addressable. But, Joe, do you have anything that you want to say?
Yeah, I would like to, in our last meeting, I was the sole person that objected to the preliminary design approval. And so what I'd like to do is take a minute to be clear about what my thoughts were and why I was objecting to the design as presented. And I'll try to do a better job at couching this in the language of the ordinance as opposed to a little more casual language. But in the ordinance, one of the things that we're supposed to ensure is that the facades of buildings do not appear to be disparate with the entire structure. And I think that my view is that the parapet wall on a gabled construction style produces an incongruity and is a disparity there. And I think the other issue is for the parapet in terms of appearance is that while it's not the whole surface of it, there is certainly, as you move down Center Street in the area we're at now, you can see what would be the back of the parapet, okay? So it would be a flat wall and you're gonna be seeing a piece of the back of it from right on the sidewalk here, okay? As the road turns and the building is angled, okay? So that was the one thing about the parapet. I felt like it was disparate and not in harmony with the balance of the construction. It would look that way. And the other issue was the windows, the front windows. I felt that, and do feel, that as presented, they are more fitting for a storefront or perhaps, what you see in a lodging balcony, like a roadside lodging balcony, a motel balcony appearance, and not particularly fitting with an eclectic, atmosphere that we have on Center Street here in the southern coastal architecture style, as well as the fact that we're asked to move constructions in that direction, as well as the fact that the storefront windows would then be incongruous with the balance of the construction style of the building. And that's one of the things that I think we're both suggested and charged with and suggested to look at as I read the ordinance, and it's also how I feel. So those are really where I was coming from in my desire to work further on the design to get at some different window treatment that fit with the rest of the building and to get away from the parapet front on the gable. Okay?
Okay, thank you, Joe. Karen, any particular questions or any comments?
No, I'm going back to re-looking at some of this stuff and looking at the new, I do agree with you about some of the windows and the parapet, but do you feel, I guess that now is not the time for that discussion. Do you feel that those issues have been addressed, I guess?
Well, I think we want to ask Ryan for some clarification. Can I show him a picture that I have a question about? I think you'll be able to explain this pretty easily, Ryan, to me. As I look at the front here, right, of the building, is this over here completely to be redesigned with these big windows like this?
Only here.
Okay, well, see, this shows like the whole thing.
Yeah,
That's why I was
your picture,
confused.
oh, there we go. Here and here. This stays the same. So it's just here and here.
See, this almost gives an impression like this is a balcony thing is a continuation over, and these big windows are what you see now. See, cause this fills up the whole space as I see it, right?
It does from top to bottom, not left to right. We reduced it about 30%. So when we were in this meeting, what I
Right.
heard from Joe was that it was too much glass. That's what I understood from it. So what we did is we reduced the
So
glazing.
you wanna look at this for a second, cause this is,
We
I know
reduced,
this is a little out of character, I apologize, but it's,
Sorry.
so this is a picture I took today. And I was trying to understand, you know, where this,
so that's
fits
there
where?
and there.
so it's not any longer than these windows
Well, yeah,
existing are?
these windows are like 2 by 2. These are very small.
Yeah, and I don't see any problem making it bigger.
That's
So
those
it's-
windows
So it's
there, right?
replacing this square from this point to here, okay, that wall face with the windows,
Yeah,
here,
yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
Okay, this stays as is, as I
Right.
understand. it.
That's right.
So
That's
it's that section.
So, I guess there's a couple thoughts to our thinking here. This building has a pretty big view of the river. And they didn't take advantage of that. They put these very small windows.
I agree.
So it was a very bad kind of design in my feeling that you don't capture that river marsh view that is right there. So that's largely why we did what we've done here, is to, you know, make the view more impactful for people that are there. I did hear Joe in the last meeting, he said too much glass, and I get that, and that's why we went back to the drawing board and we knocked it down about 30%.
So are we looking at something different here today
Yeah.
that we did for?
Yes.
Yes, this is a different, that's what confused me, Joe, this is a different rendering
Yes.
than,
So you narrowed
This
it,
was.
you
That's
narrowed it, but it's still floor to ceiling?
That's right.
Okay,
So it's about 30%
okay,
less glazing.
okay, I think.
So that was the first issue I wanted to
Right.
address.
So let me, I guess, clarify a little bit, with, yeah, I might say you reduced the glass, a couple of feet on each side, looks like?
Yeah, more than.
Okay, I don't know how to scale it, but, okay, 2 or 3 feet. Anyway, I was just looking for something, what I was thinking of is something, as you look down the side, the rest of the building on this side elevation, you see the windows are give or take half, you know, instead of floor to ceiling, right? So that's what I was trying to communicate, is that I think that would be a more fitting, congruous detail where you've got doors that are floor to ceiling, or door height, obviously, right? And then the windows are all kind of half height, right?
yeah, these are,
And so I'm all for more windows, more light, that's great, more views, but then try to do it within the context of the building as it stands.
is that doable that way at all?
Yeah, I mean, anything is doable. I could not touch the front at all of this building, but, you know.
But let me ask you this, Ryan, if I'm on the other side of that window, and I'm looking out, where does this start? Where's the bottom of the window? Is it down here? Is it up here?
No, it's down near the floor level is where it is.
Okay, see, that's what I was curious about, because on the side of the buildings, they're all high, small windows. Not that it's gotta be like the ones on the side, we all agree they need to be
The
bigger.
reason why they're that way on the side is because those windows are on pedestrian walkways.
Right, got it.
So
got it.
if someone's walking down a walkway,
You don't wanna look at the door.
well, you know, I mean, it's just, you know, you can't get that close to these windows, obviously.
Okay.
Um,
Do these open and close, or what?
No, they're fixed.
Those are all, it's just fixed
Fixed
glass?
glass, yeah.
And how wide is this in between the windows themselves?
3 inches probably. As far as the mullions, is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
The mullions, yeah, they're about 3 inches,
So,
3.5 maybe.
so where this was 2, it's now gonna be 3 going across, right?
So yeah, those are 2 individual windows, these are 3.
Right, so that's what I'm saying, from here to here is gonna be the 3 of
Yeah.
these.
Yeah, yeah,
And they're gonna go
but we
from,
brought it in some.
I
You see that?
understand that there'll
Yeah.
be a larger margin on the sides.
That's right.
And is the height all the way up to the top of the
Well,
ceiling?
you see this band board here?
Right.
That's pretty close to what that band board is there now,
Oh,
or that is the band board
That's
that is
this
there
little
now.
piece right here, right?
That's that piece, see that? There.
Ryan, do you think that, would you or your client or whoever have a giant objection to below that rail in that mullion, where it lines up with the balcony railing? You see that line, the horizontal line where the mullion comes
Yeah.
across and it's in line with the balcony railing?
Yeah.
So making that area below that part of the exterior siding of the building, therefore it provides a bit of continuity with the line from the balcony. It provides a less than full height window, but still greatly expanded view and windows beyond the current, which I agree the current windows are pretty modest.
I mean, we can certainly look at that, you know, if we did that, we would be probably reducing these windows, you know, we're about 30% now, we'd probably be reducing them like 60%.
From your original.
From the original design, so that's just, you
How
know,
much would you be expanding them from the current state?
well, I mean, what's there now, you might as well not even have windows.
Yeah, I mean, that's
They're
what I'm
nothing,
saying.
Right.
I mean, they're zero.
So you're tripling or quadrupling anyway, right?
Yeah, they might as well not even have windows there, really, to be honest, they're so small.
I
You know
understand
what I'm saying?
Right.
I mean, there's just such a strong river view across the way there, and that was what the intent was. But, I mean, if 30% isn't enough, then we'll keep chopping away at it. I guess I wasn't expecting more than 50% to be reduced, but if that's what the board is gonna ask of us, then that's what we'll.
One of it
we'll
needs to
have
be
do.
50%, right?
You could get some width back, right?
Yeah.
Potentially, yeah.
So, to recap, if I can jump in, Joe's concerned with the
Thank you.
Yeah, no,
the appearance of these floor to ceiling windows, basically, and how they don't match either of the side elevations of the other windows that are not doors. And so you are proposing that basically the lower half of the triple window at the front elevation get turned to siding.
It's actually less than half, Katie. It's not half of that existing diagram that he's got. It's that bottom little panel third.
34%, oh no, I'm just making it up, but yes,
Well,
beneath where the railing height is
Correct,
below.
correct.
Yep. But potentially widening it back out to the original design is the proposed compromise that
I think,
potentially could be presented at the next board meeting to see how that looks.
right, I think that's something that in my, to my mind's eye, looks more consistent line-wise around the building, which is where I was kind of coming from.
Okay, is there any more discussion on the windows, Karen?
No, I'm not. I think I'm over windowed.
Okay, can we discuss the parapet issue?
yeah. So parapet walls, they're not anything new to Center Street. There's lots of parapet walls up and down Center Street. Avocet has 2 or 3 parapet walls. The building next to Mr. John's has a parapet wall. The Sand Dollar has a parapet wall, and there's probably more than just that, but those are 3 that come to mind. So I kind of feel like a parapet wall is definitely more of a commercial element. You know, you don't see it on a residential, in a residential area. So it really gives, you know, gables give a residential presence more so. So that's why we thought doing a parapet wall was, you know, would be a good, you know, change for the building. Other board members, you know, made a kind of a crazy comment of why don't we galvanize the whole facade. I thought that was kind of funny, but I didn't think, you know, I thought that was a little extreme. So to meet that, you know, comment or request, we did show galvanizing that parapet. If that's what people, you know, don't mind, it would match the staircase that's going to be going in next to it. I kind of think it looks kind of cool that way. The galvanized will kind of weather naturally. So we just felt like, you know, there was nothing wrong with the parapet. I hear Joe, he's saying you can see the back end of it. I'd have to look at that. I didn't really, I never really be an issue. But if you could see the back end of it, to me, it would be either galvanized or the same aluminum material that's on the roof. So to me, that wouldn't be really, I don't know, a noticeable thing, in my mind. I didn't think that, you know, a gray back to that parapet would be anything that anyone would be, you know, not want to see there, but
Do the other buildings that you cited with the parapet walls, which I mean, I know there are many of, do they, any of those, to your knowledge, and not to my knowledge, have gabled roof systems tied into a parapet?
actually, the building next to Mr. John's may, I don't know. I'd have to look at that building again. I don't believe Avocet does, and Sandollar does not.
But
But
the drop-in deli, there's not, because they put a rooftop on there, so we reviewed it in our meetings, right?
yeah,
They're doing some work though, aren't they? Aren't they changing all that?
Yeah, at drop-in, yeah. Some.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I think that's, for me, a bit of a driver there on the parapet. Again, with the consistency issue, right?
okay.
Something to think about,
So
anyway.
so with a 20 square foot sign ordinance, so the signage there, that where it says sign, is that representative scale wise? of the
Yes,
20
that is.
20 square foot.
And what's that sign gonna say on it, Ryan?
We're working that out. It's gonna say Hotel Folly or Hotel or something of that nature. We haven't really gotten to the signage yet.
Okay, so that is going to lend itself to the idea that there is occupancy
That's
involved
right,
there.
yeah.
And it's not purely a
That's right.
business
Yeah.
front. I think that was part of the,
And so would
the
that
concern.
sign as, in that 20 square foot fit on the gable that exists there today?
I imagine it would. It might look a little odd in my mind, in my opinion. Again, gables are very residential. This is on Center Street, so, you know, the gables, for sure, not, you know, our preference.
Yeah, I think when I go back to the ordinance, Ryan, and one of the things they asked us to ensure is that we employ I'll read it, practical elements native to southern coastal communities. Porches, decks, abundant windows, doors, awnings, and ample roof overhangs. And those are not, you know, highly consistent with a parapet wall, no matter what's already in existence here, okay? So, you know, as I read that, it doesn't bring to mind parapet wall, and I understand parapet is a more commercial looking building. And there are plenty of them here, but I don't believe that's, however those got there, that was particularly the intent, or necessarily the intent of the ordinance.
Yeah, most of those buildings are actually historic.
true.
You go out west, you see parapet walls all the time. And some of the oldest buildings on Center Street have them. So,
Originally, when we discussed building this building, and Aaron, you were involved in that. I mean, I was here when we approved the original architectural design for building the building. The reason for some of the gable roofing and stuff was construction reasons, obviously, but it was never to accentuate that it was a commercial business. It was more that it was more of a residential
they
activity.
live there, yeah. they live
because-
there,
Well, wasn't it, as Alan cited at our last meeting, modeled after the Atlantic House?
You know, I don't know. I don't recall that particular point, and I didn't know the Atlantic House, but I think the point that Ryan just pointed out
yeah.
was,
Actually, he pulled up an old drugstore that had a big parapet on it, is what he
Right.
did. It wasn't the Atlantic House.
But
Okay.
He was confused, I think.
It was,
Yeah.
but if you do pull up the Atlantic House, which was a restaurant and whatnot over the water out here back in the day, the style of that building is very much like the Atlantic House, which certainly was a commercial operation and certainly historical in nature here in Folly Beach. So it was an effort to replicate some of that style and history, as I see it, not having been here for any of those conversations, but just sort of.
now,
assuming-
these are new owners of the building, right? I mean, so they're really, their view, I can't interpret what their view is, but it's clearly a little different priority than the last people were that built it, who were living there, as well as managing the inn itself. And I recognize it is on a commercial district and it's Center Street, and these people would like to be able to have the opportunity to expand the commercial aspect of the facility. Is there any scenario where, in your construction heart or mind, that you see that the parapet can either be, I guess it's not a parapet if it matches the roof line of a gabled roof, or the sign doesn't fit within it, but I don't know what other option there is for not either, it's either like all parapet or no parapet, right? I mean, there's not a lot of,
There's not a real grade in between.
Okay.
A parapet's, kind of a parapet, and a gable's a gable. We're trying to cover the gable with the parapet to give it more of a commercial presence and not a residential presence. So that's really the thought process behind it.
yeah. And again, that does change the architectural intent of the original building as we approved it to begin with. It doesn't mean it can't be changed, I'm just saying, I know that, I recall specifically why, how that was built the way it is. The doors below, if I can shift a little bit here, the garage doors of note there, the existing doors are solid doors. And are these gonna be the same doors, or are you doing something different with those?
These are new doors, these are glass doors.
Yeah,
There are doors there now that have a little bit of glass in them up top, but these are full view glass doors. There is gonna be a commercial use down there, so they were hoping to have as much natural light as they could and be able to open these doors up, as it is a business down there.
what kind of business would that be?
It'll be an eatery of some sort,
Okay,
yeah.
So the doors running are gonna be glass, running on,
The garage doors that we're talking
The
about.
ground
the
level,
bottom-
yep, the ground level doors.
Yeah.
So can those, just curious, Ryan, can those doors like that be flood-proof?
Yes,
Because isn't that sort of what goes on at the low-lock bar? Don't they have
That's
some of those
correct.
doors? Okay, am I
Yep.
remembering?
yeah, they can withstand the flood pressures, yeah.
Okay.
but they'll be roll-up doors.
That's right.
That's the idea, that when they're closed for business, you'll be able to see that's a business because of the glass frontage
Or
on
if it was
them.
inclement weather, or.
Is there intent to have any designs, logos, or anything on those
No,
doors?
sir, not at this time. There's no plans for signage down there at this time.
Does the existing sign go away if you do a parapet, the one that's hanging laterally
Yeah,
on the
there's a really
side?
small sign there now.
Yeah, I
that
can
would
see that.
Be removed.
yeah, well, the details of the sign and some of that, we'll be reviewing those
Yes.
in the colors?
Yes,
Okay,
that's correct.
thanks.
Okay, any more questions from Mr. Buck in terms of what I think he's willing to go look at some of the concerns, and I hate delaying your project, Ryan, because I think I understand the implications of that, and I'm apologetic for that, but I do appreciate your willingness to look at and have come back with a greater rendering, a more understandable rendering from my perspective of what we were reconsidering here. When is the next regularly scheduled meeting, Katie? 15th?
The 15th.
The 15th, okay.
So I would need,
It's only 12 days.
correct, I would need applications and other documentation from our applicant, by the 8th, maybe the 9th. So the 15th would be the quickest turnaround time, anyway. To get a next meeting, which is a regularly scheduled meeting.
Okay, is that a doable option for you, Ryan? I mean, I know you're in a position where you're gonna do whatever we ask you to do, but I also don't wanna put you in a disadvantaged position that's totally unfair.
Right.
So, we would still need to do final approval at that meeting anyway.
Okay.
And if the board
Okay.
is comfortable, you guys do have the right to do preliminary and final
Yep.
same meeting.
The same time, yeah. Okay,
So we're back on schedule, sort of, so to speak, in terms of you having the full bing blessing. Okay,
Steve,
so,
would it help if some of these, changes, I know there's one colored picture, but if some of the others were colored too, does that help?
well, I was, you
Well,
know,
what I might suggest, and I hadn't paid much attention, let me interject.
Sure.
For just a second. What I might suggest, Ryan, because we're having, you know, some, as you hear, more clear on the illustrations and whatnot, kind of step through those requirements in that section of the ordinance where they do require, or not require, yeah, it does require, I guess, some, photographic, stuff and,
is it
there's a laundry-
allowable?
It says conceptual model showing the new building and existing environment if and when required by the Board of, Design Review.
I personally don't want to put him through making a building a whole conceptual model. What I would like to ask, is it not, is it out of context, or is it not allowed? Joe, maybe you can weigh in on this a minute. For us to physically have a walkthrough as a group and be able to have Ryan there when we're saying, let me visually understand what we're talking about with the garage doors, for example, if there's a question on those or anything else. Karen, would that be anything that would help you in putting it in
Well, no,
context?
I'm pretty good at visualizing, but, I think that what might help is a picture of how it exists right now, and then what he proposes. I think the concern here that I'm hearing mostly is the front elevation, and the doors and the windows and stuff. So, I don't know, I mean, I certainly am, I live 2
Well-
blocks, you know, we're close, there's no problem going by there, but,
Well, I mean, we are only really talking about the front elevation. You're exactly correct. And
Yeah.
that's why I went by there and took pictures of it so that I could physically ask, because I wanted to make sure I understood. And that was helpful for me. I apologize that I can't show everybody my picture. But however that comes out, I mean,
Right. I don't know, I think there was some thought given to what's in the list of stuff for a preliminary review, you know, that would be to clear all this up. Really easy, and it doesn't seem to be onerous, especially since most of the hard work is done and done. Anyway, I'm just throwing that out.
There's some specific things from the ordinance or preliminary review documentation that you want to call out specifically?
Well, the photographs of the existing condition and the,
So C.
conceptual
C.
placement of the rendering in that context. So what's it gonna look like on the street before and after, right?
I think that'd be helpful.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I hear a lot of, discussion about,
So-
not understanding.
So a photo of the front of the building, is that, am I understanding that correctly? You
Well,
want a photo?
If you read, well, you don't have it in front of you, do you? What it specifically says is photographs showing streetscapes of the structure and sides of the structure. That was part of our earlier thing. But then it calls out a panoramic photograph including a general view of the street showing the building, site and adjacent property, which is the streetscape, individual photographs of the buildings immediately adjacent to and across from the site, and a frontal view of the building site from the street. And then it would include a diagram of what out of that picture will change, which I think you've captured here for what you're saying, but we're asking you to make some considerations for the comments that we've made relative to the window placements and the parapet placement. And then, of course, everything that applied for final review, I mean, obviously, those are the things that documentation required for final review. I'm sure you reviewed that, and there are A through L for final review, a lot of which is in these diagrams. But if you can cross-reference them a little bit, of exactly which one each is showing us, I think that'd be helpful. Katie, does that make sense? Do we have a sense?
You are asking the applicant to satisfy the documentation requirements for a preliminary and final review for our next meeting.
Correct.
Is that what we're planning to try to consider, you think, Frank?
I'm sorry?
Preliminary and final?
Yeah, that would be ideal if we could.
It's a lot to do.
Joe, where do we go from here? Do we just not make a motion? Do we need to make a motion to deny preliminary approval? So I don't want it to kill the project, we're just asking for
No,
more
we're just delayed.
information.
We're doing it the,
You know what, I would say you just table it for now.
Okay, and I'll put it under unfinished business for the
Yeah.
next meeting, okay. So no motions are going to be taken, our next meeting is February 15th. Is there any more discussion, or is there?
I just want, I'm sure Ryan's aware of this, but specifically, it's that section 33.050 that we're referencing in here, Ryan. And it's on the website, you get everything you need in the 4 pages that encapsulate each of those 3 steps. Again, I'd be personally appreciative of being able to have all that information before we move through final approval and have everything underway for completion. Okay?
So is that possible by our next meeting?
Is it,
Gonna try. Final approval. I think it's your.
we're gonna try to do both preliminary and final at the next regularly scheduled meeting. If is that a time frame that's reasonable for you, Ryan? If not, we can try to,
No, I don't need a special meeting, I think that would be fine, I think.
okay. I didn't know if you needed it slid at all, give you more
Yeah, no, I
time.
mean, at this point, it's close enough.
Okay.
I think, I'll just throw this out here, I don't know about staff, but I think the 4 of us board members here, if you need to kind of get things cleared up in a which stage, we have a preliminary review, is that okay? And get that nailed down, and then go to, then finish it, that we'd all be amenable to calling whatever special meeting we can do to help facilitate your scheduling, you know?
Yeah.
Okay. But you understand my point is that I would hate for you to go through all the ins and outs of the final submission when you're still kind of a little up in the air on preliminary.
Okay.
You feel comfortable to submit to me, we'll go from there.
Yeah, I gotta read this section to figure that out, so.
Okay, I have no further comments. I guess you've made your staff comments. Is there anything else that we need to?
I have none. Sorry, I'm good.
No, I guess we should have a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
All in favor? All right? So,
We
we're
are
good.
adjourned
Need to
at
be recused from that.
5:25.